This video is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not financial or trading advice. Do your own research and consult a professional advisor. Markets involve risk, and the creator is not—
Welcome to an in-depth analysis of India's energy crisis in 2026 and how the disruption of the Strait of Hormuz fundamentally reshaped its energy future. In 2026, one narrow sea route became a major risk for India's economy. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important oil routes. When tensions in West Asia increased, the volatility immediately impacted this critical choke point, raising concerns globally and in India. The consequence was swift. Crude oil prices jumped, LPG supply came under immediate pressure, and India was forced to fundamentally rethink its energy security strategy. But why does the Strait of Hormuz matter so much to India? It connects the Persian Gulf, a major oil source, with global oil markets. A large share of the world's crude oil and liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, moves through this narrow strategic route. For India, this route is critically important because the country imports most of its crude oil and depends heavily on overseas energy supplies to run its vast economy. The crisis quickly transitioned from a geopolitical risk to a severe economic shock, primarily through the price of crude oil. Before the crisis, crude prices were manageable, but as tensions escalated, the price for the Indian crude basket moved sharply higher, increasing import bills overnight. This created immediate pressure on petrol, diesel, and transport logistics. When crude becomes expensive, the impact doesn't stay inside oil markets. It spreads across the whole economy, fueling inflation. In response to this vulnerability, India accelerated its strategy to reduce dependence on the volatile West Asia region. Instead of relying heavily on Gulf supplies, India expanded crude sourcing significantly, welcoming more oil from non-Gulf suppliers such as the United States, Brazil, and Russia. This shift was significant. It was a clear transition from a strategy focused purely on low-cost buying to a security-first approach, prioritizing supply resilience over minimal cost. While crude oil supply was diversified, the situation with liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, remained a major supply challenge for India. India depends heavily on imported LPG, and much of it traditionally moves through the Strait of Hormuz. This meant the energy crisis reached directly into Indian kitchens, threatening household budgets. To control rising demand and protect vulnerable households from price spikes, stringent supply management became extremely important for the government. The energy shock was not limited to fuel. It also severely affected the agriculture sector and, consequently, food prices. Crude oil and natural gas are fundamentally linked to the production of essential chemicals and fertilizers needed for farming. When energy prices rise or supply becomes limited, fertilizer costs increase significantly. This puts massive pressure on farmers and eventually drives up food prices for consumers nationwide. While oil companies might report strong profits on paper due to high global crude prices, the real operational situation can be far more complex under a controlled pricing regime. When domestic fuel prices are controlled by the government to protect consumers from the shock, oil marketing companies often have to absorb the losses themselves. Even with potential subsidies and compensation, the rising costs of crude and LPG imports still create enormous pressure on cash flow and operating margins for these state-run giants. Welcome. The 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis exposed a major vulnerability for India, highlighting a critical link between energy security and global politics. The crisis showed that energy security is not only an economic issue, it is fundamentally a geopolitical issue. The disruption in the Strait of Hormuz had far-reaching consequences, proving that securing energy supply relies on more than just trade agreements. India's energy planning is now directly connected with its foreign policy and diplomatic actions across key supplier regions. India must manage complex supplier relationships, secure vital shipping routes, handle international sanctions, and maintain strategic reserves to mitigate risks. India's long-term energy strategy requires several critical shifts to build true resilience against future shocks. This strategy demands faster diversification across supply regions and fuels, coupled with building stronger strategic petroleum reserves to act as a buffer. Furthermore, India must accelerate domestic energy production to reduce reliance on vulnerable imports and secure local supply chains. Accelerated adoption of alternative energy, including solar, wind, and potentially green hydrogen, is vital to transition away from fossil fuels. The goal is clear. India must reduce the risk of depending too much on a single route, one specific region, or one dominant fuel source. The Strait of Hormuz crisis was far more than an isolated oil market event. It was a severe warning for the entirety of India's economy. The volatility demonstrated how rapidly global supply shocks can impact India's stability and growth projections. Crude oil, LPG, fertilizer, food prices, company profits, and India's foreign policy are all deeply interconnected and vulnerable to energy shocks. India is now moving from being a reactive energy importer to actively shaping its future as a proactive energy power on the global stage. The biggest question remains: can India build enough resilience and strategic depth before the next inevitable global energy shock arrives? For more simple explanations on finance, energy, economy, and global market impact, subscribe to the channel right now. And share your opinion on India's energy challenge in the comments section below.
For daily stock market news, business updates, and simple financial explanations, subscribe to our channel. Like, share, and press the bell icon for the latest updates.